We've done a lot of talking about NFL draft prospects at different positions here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, but today we're ranking our top 10 cornerbacks the Steelers should take in this upcoming draft class. I'm Chris Carter, your host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, joined by Alan Saunders. We'll talk about that and some revealing stuff from Kenny Pickett and how it plays into the Steelers' hopes for this upcoming season in the future. We'll talk about all that right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video on YouTube, subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And joined is Alan Saunders. He's the man from SteelersNow.com. We have him on all the time. Alan, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Alan and I are going to be competing today. Not really. We're just listing our top 10 cornerbacks. And I think, yeah, sure. We're competing. Yeah, whoever likes this more.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be something about this. But in fact, you know what? That's it. I'll do a poll on this. This will be on Twitter. Check my Twitter account, Carter Critiques, whose top 10 list was better.
This is a road game for me because, I mean, it's your podcast. So I'm going to guess that they're going to like your stuff better. Like, it's probably starting out at just like it's Carter -3 is the line here.
Okay? Carter -3. 3 Twitter votes? That's not that's a pretty easy bet. But anyways, but seriously, I think it's interesting. We've talked about the different prospects, but now it's time, like maybe not the full big board, but we can at least start narrowing down positions. Who are the priorities? So we're going to start at the top and work our way down because we've talked about the top guys even before the season, the offseason began. We know who those guys are. But I think what it's going to get really interesting is when you and I get to 5 through 10, where do we rank certain guys and what's the priority we have given to different players? So this is going to be fun and interesting. And who knows, maybe our top 5 is also a little bit different. But let's get right to it here. Alan, my first cornerback, if the Steelers had the pick of the litter of everyone, the pick of the litter, you could pick the best one. I'm going with Devin Witherspoon. I know he didn't run at the combine, and there's some questions about that, but I love his instincts on the field. I think he would test great anyways. He's my number one guy. Is that your number one guy, or are you going Gonzalez?
It is not my number one guy. Give me Christian Gonzalez from Oregon.
Okay.
I'm a little scared off by Witherspoon's lack of testing. He doesn't look that fast on tape either. So, like, I didn't expect him to run great, and now not running just think brings up some questions. He also didn't face like a ton of great competition in the Big Ten, and the times that he did, just okay. So I just think Gonzalez athletically is as close to an ideal package as you can get. And I like the way he worked against some of the top receivers. We got to see him go against Jordan Addison. I like everything about Christian Gonzalez as a player. Athletic family, has family members that were Olympians, really everything you could want. That's my guy. But Devin Witherspoon is not much of a. I just think it's the difference between like can't miss and probably won't miss. That's right. That's my only difference there.
No, I'm right with you there. But so then your number 2 is Witherspoon?
Yeah. Because
my number 2 is Gonzalez. So we're both. It's just what we prefer there as picks. Either way, if you got either one of them, I think that the Steelers fans will be doing backflips back there. So let's get to the next part. Your number 3. I think consensus, a lot of people would say Joey Porter Jr. Is that your number 3 as well?
It is, and it's interesting because I went with the traits he got in Gonzalez, but Joey Porter Jr. is not that. I just love his combination of size, strength, and he doesn't have interceptions, but he plays the ball in the air really well. Yeah. I think you could teach up some interceptions with him. But, if you look at this list and you start to break down, okay, who's my top 5, who's my top 10, who's my top 15, if what you're looking for at the cornerback position is size, and there are a ton, more than there have ever been, of 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" NFL wide receivers, JBJ is the only guy that is really going to be able to handle those guys physically. Like, if I'm drafting a guy to cover George Pickens, Joey Porter Jr. is the guy I want. Okay. And there are a lot of those guys out there in the NFL that if you just aren't big enough you're not going to be able to do it. And so I think he brings, even though some of these other guys that are going to come in the next couple picks ran really well and are super athletic, I think his size is the more rare trait in this class. And that's why, to me, he comes up the list. And I think you could get those interceptions up because he gets his hands on the ball really well. He plays the ball in the air really well. He just didn't catch them all this year.
Right. And to be fair, also, he didn't get a lot of targets. I think he was targeted 30 times this year. So it's like, his numbers a little bit lower, maybe because he was just not getting thrown at a lot. Okay, so there we have it. Those are our 1, 2, and our 3. Our 1s and 2s are different. Let's get to our 4 here. A lot of people will put Deontay Banks here. I did not. Is Deontay Banks your 4?
Deontay Banks is my 4. I just think the athletic testing is too tempting to pass up by anyone else. I have questions about the tape. It's not always very consistent, but athletically, almost every bit as good as Gonzalez. In fact, maybe better than Gonzalez. Maybe like if you were to put them athletically on a scale, he's probably the best athlete of the entire group. Corner is more than just being an athlete, as Steelers fans certainly know from there. To me, like specifically drafting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Deontay Banks is a guy I want to stay away from. They are not a build a corner group. They're not developers, okay? But maybe for somebody else, like just for my top 10, I think the athleticism being off the charts is enough to put him there. But specifically for the Steelers, I would be wary of Deontay Banks because their history of teaching up corners is not very good.
I agree with you there. And that's why he's not my number 4. I wanted to get someone with ball production. I wanted to get someone who had displayed the ability to go after the ball and get it. And some people might think I'm crazy with this one, but I went with Emmanuel Forbes. I love the way that he attacked the ball in the air. I know that he's super light, came into the combine at 166. I think you could put some weight on that guy, but his ball skills look just so much more fluid and natural. 6 interceptions, 7 breakups this past year alone, not to mention 3 the year before that and 5 the year before that. I just think if you don't get one of those top 3 guys, you would be I think the Steelers would be more than happy than living with Emmanuel Forbes. And 6'1", also runs a 4.35, doesn't test all the way around as well as Deontay Banks, but still has the same 40 time speed, still explosive, still really good there. He's my 4, and I like him right there. What is your okay, well, let's just keep going because eventually I assume we'll get to Forbes on your list. Your number
Forbes
5 here.
I got Forbes.
Okay.
And I love the ball production. I also think if you like a player that is the most like Cam Sutton in this draft class, it's Emmanuel Forbes. Like if you're looking like directly replacing what the Steelers just lost, like that's it. He's a guy that is a little bit small to play outside, but is fast enough and technical enough to do it. Would be a really, really, really good cover slot corner. He's not going to play the run like a Mike Hilton. Cam Sutton never did. Actually, not a very good tackler. I think that to me is exactly what he could be, like an inside-outside pure coverage guy. Great ball skills, maybe better ball skills than Cam Sutton. I think if you're looking to replace what the Steelers lost, he is it. I love him for them at 32. Or if they trade down from 17, I don't know if I'd go there at 17, but I really like the player.
I really like him as well. I think he'd be a great fit in Pittsburgh. All right, we're going to get through to 6 through 10 because I think this is where it's going to get really interesting.
Your 5.
I'm sorry. I got to give my 5. You're right.
Okay.
I apologize. I was jumping the gun there. I was excited to get to our commercial break here. But my number 5 here is actually Julius Brents. I love his tape. I think that he fits really well. I know that he doesn't have Deontay Banks' speed, but he's extremely explosive. He has a good vertical. He has the size. I'm a big Julius Brents fan. I think just as far as and like just talking to him at the combine, I was like, this guy fits. Like if the Steelers get this guy, and again, not at 17, but maybe if they trade back in the first row or like second round, like if they could get him somewhere in there, I think the Steelers could be like, okay, because he's also a guy, you don't have to coach him up as much. He mirrors very well. He places very well. I think that he's a guy that simply is like, hey, we're going to put you in this position. This is our scheme. That's the only thing he'd have to adapt to. I think he could be a plug-and-play corner for the Steelers. I think he also could be one of the more underrated guys. Alan, I want to get your thoughts on Brents, because I think that you have him somewhere in your top 10 as well on this list. We'll get all that and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast in just a minute. But first, before we do any of that, got to talk to you guys about our great friends at FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook out there. You got to get on it right now because they have the no-sweat first bet where new customers can get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if they miss on their first bet. And this is a great opportunity. While March Madness may be done, the NBA playoffs are right around the corner, as are the NHL playoffs, and so many of the things that you can bet on with FanDuel. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can sign up today, and that'll help them out. It's where you can claim your no-sweat first bet, where you wager on anything from the money line to point spreads to which team is going to be hitting the most three-pointers, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot with this no-sweat first bet, up to $1,000 when you win today or when you lose on your first bet with FanDuel today. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Okay, so we've gone over our top 5 cornerbacks list. We're going to finish this list, and then we want to get to some things that we've read about recently about Kenny Pickett that I think both of us have some interesting insight on. So just to recap, I went Witherspoon, Gonzalez, Porter, Emmanuel Forbes, Julius Brents. You went Gonzalez, Witherspoon, Porter, and then you went Banks, and then you went Forbes.
Yep.
So there we are. Who's your number 6 guy? Is it Julius Brents or is it Cam Smith or Kelly Ringo?
It is Julius Brents. I actually, at the Senior Bowl, there were 2 guys, and one of them I'll get to later. There were 2 guys at the Senior Bowl that really, to me, stood out as like, this guy is way better than people are talking about him. Like, and Brents was considered at that point to be like maybe like an early day 3 or late day 2 kind of pick. Way better than that. Just great tape. Love his attitude. Love the person. I think he's a really good fit for the Steelers specifically, but I mean, there aren't very many teams that don't need big, fast, strong, tough corners. Plays the run really well. I still think he's underrated. He's moved up a lot since then. I still think he's underrated. I think he should be a middle of the second round pick. I'm not sure if he'll go there. He's not considered by most to be there, but I think that's where he should end up.
I'm right with you. That's why I put him at my 5 spot. I think that he'd be great early in the second round for the Steelers. All right, so that's your 6. My 6, and this is where we kind of match back up again, is Deontay Banks, who we talked about earlier. Great athleticism, not as great ball production. Would like to see more of that, and I do think that if the Steelers could make it work, great. They just haven't had a lot of track record in doing that. So, but still, 6 is still a really good spot to get a cornerback as far as the list this year with how deep this is. All right, so this is when it starts to get interesting again. Your 7th spot. Who's your 7th cornerback that you have ranked here for the Steelers?
Cam Smith from South Carolina. Again, loved ball skills. Ran flat out poorly at the combine. I didn't see him being that slow on tape, so I would take the risk and say I think I can get an elite interception guy and that he will not be that slow or doesn't play that slow. Track speed is different than game speed. I don't know. I'm willing to take a chance on him in the second round just because I honestly think that turnovers are the number one thing for a defensive back right now. The way the league is set up, it's just so hard to cover well. Like, it's almost impossible to play good defense. You're going to get completions against you. You're going to give up touchdowns. You've got to get takeaways too. And he's probably the best in the country at it. Give me Cam Smith.
I hear you on that. I hear you on that. I went with Kelly Ringo in my 7th spot. And Cam Smith, it was a tough choice between the 2 of them. Ringo had 2 interceptions this past year. Smith had 1, but he also had 3 the year before that and 2 the year before that. So, I mean, he has the ball production there too. I also looked at, Cam Smith, Cam Smith's running at, his performance at the combine. I was like, gave me some pause. Whereas Kelly Ringo hit under the 4.4 mark at a 4.36, has 6'2", 207, just a little bit bigger, and that's why I put him there. And I was like, you know what? I think he has enough ball production. I think he'll show more if he was put into the Steelers defense. That's why I have him at 7. Cam Smith, though, definitely a guy I respect, and I'll jump the gun and say he's my 8. Is your 8 Kelly Ringo?
It is not. I've got Tyreek Stevenson from Miami at number 8.
Interesting. And he made a Steelers visit this week.
He did. I think he's an interesting prospect in that he's not great at any one thing. And I think guys like that tend to get overlooked in the draft process because people want something to bang their fist on the table about it. Like I could say like Cam Smith is going to get a lot of interceptions, even though he's slow. I can say Deontay Banks is an elite athlete, even though his tape is kind of rough. I don't think there's anything I can say like that about Tyreek Stevenson. He's just an overall very good corner. Played in a defense that I think is very easily translatable to the NFL. And I like the player. I think he fits and he checks a lot of boxes, even if he's not outstanding at anything. This is kind of the place where I like to put those guys because I think, like I said, they get overlooked a little bit, but I think Tyreek Stevenson's a good player.
I hear you on that. And I have, like I said, I have Cam Smith at my 8 spot for all the reasons you were listing. I still think he'd be a very good corner to add in this group. And Tyreek Stevenson is my 9 on this list. I like him. I think he like the way you described him is the way I look at him is that this is a guy with a lot of positives, and I think he has the potential to be a jack of all trades when it comes to the cornerback position. He can do a lot of different things well, but like you, I find it like one thing the Steelers should be hitting on with these, especially with these early picks, are guys who are really X factors. I think Tyreek Stevenson, if the Steelers drafted him, would be a solid to good corner who would be a good player for them. But then I think he would also not turn into an X factor corner, which I do think they want to hit on if they're drafting a corner early in this draft class with how deep it is. So
yeah, he doesn't have the upside of the other guys we've talked about.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
His upside is just solid starter, which
exactly.
Like if you take and look, I think he's probably an end of the second round, early third round kind of guy. If you're taking a player there, I think you'll take solid starter. But there are some guys here that we haven't talked about yet that are maybe more like high upside but bust potential. I don't see bust potential in Tyreek Stevenson. I think you kind of know what you're getting. It's going to be pretty solid. But yeah, he does not have the upside of really anyone we've named so far.
Okay, so he's my 9. Who's your 9?
I have Keely Ringo at 9. I'm just not a big fan of his game. His tape is not great. I think he got way overrated. You know what it is that I think he got way overrated early on the draft process. When there were people talking about this, like in November and October, people were talking about him as like a maybe like 15 to 20 first round pick, and I just didn't see that at all. There needed to be a correction there. I think it's happened in some extent. I still see him hovering around the first round a lot. To me, he's more like end of day, end of round 2, into round 3 kind of guy. His athletic numbers, I think, were better than I expected. He plays to me a little bit slow. I honestly wonder if he might be better off as a free safety. I think that might fit his game a little bit better. But you look, if you're talking about the second round, if you get a good free safety, okay, like that's fine. I'm not sure about his man-to-man coverage skills, and it comes out on tape a good bit.
I hear that. All right. With that being said, who's the last guy in your top 10?
So I don't know. This is really tough for me. So I considered like 5 different guys for this spot.
This is the tricky part. Yeah.
And to me, I could make a good argument for any number of people here. My guy, though, and the other guy that to me really stood out the Senior Bowl is Kyu Blue Kelly from Stanford. Another big, strong, thick guy is going to play the run really well and just really, really physical corner. I didn't see outside of maybe Porter and maybe and Witherspoon, nobody else is as physical as he is going up against bigger guys. He really showed a lot of heart and was flying around in the Senior Bowl game. Like the drills they're contact, but you're not like trying to kill people in the drills, but in the game when it was full bore, like he came up and hit people in the run. For a corner that's only 6 foot, maybe 200 pounds, he hits a lot harder than that. He's a thick dude. And I just think there's upside there, right? Compared to like a guy like Stevenson, like I can see Kelly being a top corner, whereas most of the rest of the guys in this that I could pick in this area, a guy like Garrett Williams. So there's not a lot of upside there, but probably will be a good player, or some guys that are probably limited to just the slot. I picked him over some guys like that just because I do think you'd get that number one corner upside with him. But he's a little grabby. There's definitely some things to work on, but I like the player, and I'd take a chance on him.
See, I did go with that slot corner. Can you guess who my number 10 guy is?
There's some options here. It's a good slot corner class.
It is. I'm going with Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. I know that he's 5'8", he's short, but man, he runs a good 40. He flips his hips well. He had 3 interceptions last year, 10 breakups. He has good ball production. I know that he wouldn't be your outside man. He'd specifically be a slot corner, but I think he'd be the kind of slot corner the Steelers have been missing for years now. Like Mike Hilton, really good slot corner for what he did, but it was because he played downhill. He was good playing off the ball. He could like kind of float in zones well, but he wasn't a man-to-man type of corner. He wasn't going to just run with guys and take away receivers deep down the field. Same thing with Arthur Mollett. But Travius Hodges-Tomlinson would absolutely be that. I think he would be a guy that runs all over the place. He tests well. He runs well. He has good ball production. And this would get back to the idea of getting guys who contribute with turnovers. And I think that if you put him out there in the middle, not your traditional outside corner. He's not your outside cornerback of the future, but I think as a slot corner, he'd be such an asset to them, especially in the second round. You could even wait to the back end of the second round, whether at 49 or even trading back if you do some trades and you get a later second round pick. I don't know if he'd be there at 80, but I do think that he would be an asset to the Steelers. And it's something that I talked about with Mike DeFabo just yesterday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I think cornerback, the Steelers could easily double up here and not feel bad about it, and getting 2 good prospects here, one on the outside, one in the slot, and have guys for the future who could build up this cornerback room.
Yeah, I agree. I had him the highest of the just pure slot guys. And the other guys I think I would consider in that sort of, maybe not that high, but the same range as Clark Phillips from Utah and Riley Moss from Iowa. 2 completely different players, but guys I like as well. It's a good, the Steelers are looking for help in the slot, it's a good slot corner class. Not as many big guys. That's why I went with Kelly, but I think Hodges-Tomlinson's a really good player. Interesting that we both picked guys there with NFL bloodlines. I wrote about that at SteelersNow.com. Kelly's dad played for Mike Tomlin with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Tomlinson part of Hodges-Tomlinson is because he's the nephew of Lindanian Tomlinson.
Who's that? I have no idea. You say, but But point being, bloodlines are big there. But that is interesting. We both went that way. But point being, like you said, like that's our top 10. And there's still a lot of worthy guys that would come after this. This is a very good cornerback class. We just wanted to go through our top 10
corner class I can remember in a long time. There's a lot of guys we didn't name.
Right. There's a lot of guys,
really good players.
There's a lot of guys we could still get to, but the point being, if the Steelers were to take one early, those are our top 10 options. Let us know if you agree. I will post a Twitter poll on my Twitter account at Carter Critiques. You could vote for me or Alan who had the better top 10 list, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll see who actually did. And we'll bring this up next week when you're back on again, Alan. But Alan, I want to get to you about some of the things that Kenny Pickett has said recently on Steelers.com. You wrote about it for SteelersNow.com. Lots to talk about there. We'll do that all right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing our show here. We just did our top 10 cornerbacks of this draft class for the Steelers to take. Now, let's talk about some things that have recently been discussed or opened up about with Kenny Pickett. And, of course, Kenny Pickett was on Steelers.com, and an article that Teresa Varley published. Also, shout out to Teresa. She's awesome. where it was just called No Days Off, and it was just about Kenny Pickett's approach, not to just this offseason, but how he worked last season. He talked about there were plenty of days where he was going in when it was dark in the morning, leaving when it was dark at night, and how that kind of did mess with him. He talked about losing his grandfather just after his first appearance in the NFL after the Jets game, and then playing through that, and the work that he's put in from this. And Alan, this isn't a shock that Kenny Pickett is a workhorse, that he's just a demon who just grinds tape, grinds study, grinds workouts. That's what he's doing now with his offseason. He talked about, with his fiance, he took like a couple days off, and she was like, go to work. You obviously need to, because you can't be happy unless you are. And that's kind of shown his workouts. And you wrote something that was very interesting on your website about how, whereas there's a lot of hype about free agency, a lot of hype about this NFL draft class, the biggest thing the Steelers can get that's going to help them be better in 2023 and beyond is actual improvement from the players that are on their roster right now, especially because they got a lot of young players, and especially Kenny Pickett. When you read through what Kenny Pickett is saying and where his mind is at right now, Alan, does he give you confidence that he could become that guy for the Steelers?
Yes. This is the thing that I think, and obviously I had a closer vantage point than most people did covering Kenny at Pitt for 5 years, but this is the thing that everyone was the most sure about when it came to Kenny Pickett, that he was going to show up to work every day. He was going to bust his butt. He was going to put in long hours. He was going to work all off season. He was going to try as hard as he could to get better, because the thing that we saw, the trademark of Kenny Pickett's time at Pitt, was how much better he got, was the improvement, right? That is the thing that we should feel very comfortable expecting from Kenny Pickett, is that he's going to work really hard to get better. And I think there's a lot in his game that we can look at from last season and say, okay, is some of this like physically limiting? Yeah, sure. But there's lots that wasn't, right? There is a ton that he can clean up, that was mental, that was preparation, that was just mistakes not to make a second time. Like you think back to that Jets game where he throws that ball all the way across the field at Pat Fryermuth's head. He gets intercepted. They lose the game. You think about that Dolphins game where he has the choice between running and throwing on the run, throws the interception at the goal line. Like, those are just things you need to learn once to not do anymore, and you will get better. But I think there's mechanical stuff he can improve on too. He's been working with Tony Rasiopi down in Florida. That's his personal quarterbacks coach. I think Kenny Pickett can be a lot better than we saw statistically on paper last year, that we did see in those little flashes, especially towards the end of the season.
It's funny you brought up the whole, not making it, he brings it up himself, that not making the same mistakes thing, because that's my biggest thing about Kenny Pickett. That was when he was at Pitt, if he would make a mistake or if he would get fooled one way, he would study the heck out of it, and then you wouldn't see him make that same mistake again. And the ways that he made his mistakes, he would kind of shore them up. And that's what made him such a good quarterback in his fifth year for Pitt. When he was there in 2021 and he led him to the ACC championship, was that there were a lot of those teams that were throwing different defensive looks at him, and he wasn't flustered by it. He didn't look confused. He knew where he needed to go most of the time. And that's where I think he had a really great command of the field. And that's where I think that Kenny Pickett can be great for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if he can be that field commander and continue to learn. And I think we saw a bit of that his rookie season, especially down the tail end of the year when, after he came back from his second head injury, but he was able to come back, play. We saw his clutch play. He talked about how much he studies, especially just for 2-minute drills, which is why we saw some very clutch touchdowns for him down the stretch against the Ravens and the Raiders in key games that kept the Steelers' playoff hopes alive until the last week. And I think all of this adds up for being a very good tone setter for not just him, but also setting the tone for what the expectations are going to be for other Steelers around the room. Kenny Pickett could set example, but he's still a young player. Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, those guys are going to be the guys that lead the room. But in 3-4 years' time, when Kenny Pickett is going to be not just not a rookie, but also an experienced veteran with pedigree with the Pittsburgh Steelers, as long as his career keeps going in the trajectory that I think you and I see him on, he's going to be the guy that challenges people, that like grabs someone's face mask. And he did this at Pitt, like his freshman season. They're playing a game.
I think he might be there already. Like I especially because you think about, okay, you named a bunch of guys who are stars in the NFL that have been there, done that, guys, Pro Bowlers, maybe a future Hall of Famer. None of them are on the offense, right? Like, okay, it's like for team wide, I don't think probably not. Okay, but offense, like this is a young offense. Kenny is not the only guy that needs to get better. Najee Harris can be better. George Pickens can absolutely be better. Pat Freiermuth can be better. Deontay Johnson has shown he can be better than he was last year. Sure, he wants to prove that he can be better. Like that offense needs to improve as a unit, and it's going to be Kenny driving it. I can't remember if it was Mike Tomlin or Omar Khan, and all the offseason availabilities are blending together in my head right now. But at one point I asked him, like, what's different this year, as opposed to last year when you're so focused on quarterback in the draft. And I think it was Omar said, well, with quarterback, so much of the evaluation is of the person. How does he learn? How does he respond to adversity? How does he communicate? Is he teachable? Like, can we work with him on a day-to-day basis? And he's like, yeah, well, look at a defensive tackle. None of that stuff matters. It's like just ball, right? Like, can he play or can he not play? And I just think Kenny checked all those boxes so well. Like that answer to me, just like it makes it why Kenny Pickett was worth the pick he was, because all those things matter almost as much for a quarterback as how good he is at throwing the football. And Kenny's great at all that stuff.
Exactly. And I just think, again, when we read this, I encourage you, read Alan's piece on why this is so important, and not just with Kenny Pickett, but everyone, but also do read that piece by Teresa Varley on Steelers.com. They did a great job, I think, just going through and you get the real sense of who Kenny Pickett is. And this is who I was telling y'all he was when I covered him at Pitt. This guy is about football. He's about getting better. He's about not making excuses. And, he talked about being his harshest critic. All of these things, I think, are the right tone that you get from a leader for the Pittsburgh Steelers and a person, and I think that for the long term, if you get this from him, it goes down the line. And if it's coming from your quarterback, I think it changes the tone. Ben Roethlisberger was a leader in different ways, but Ben Roethlisberger was a guy who you'd see him make the same mistake a few times in the season, and more than a few times. Sometimes you'd see him he wasn't the biggest student of the game. Like he wouldn't be the biggest film guru. Kenny Pickett is that. And whereas Kenny Pickett doesn't have Ben's height and his weight or his arm strength, I think that Kenny Pickett could have the wiles of a veteran much earlier in his career than maybe Ben did. And I think he can also have the field general sense where he's going to be able to see so much more, understand so much more. And by the time that he becomes a veteran in the NFL, that's like, has 4 or 5 years experience, and he's the bona fide leader of the offense, he could be able to do a lot of things more consistently and make this more of an efficient offense, whether or not it has Matt Canada, whether or not, they draft more wide receivers this year. I think he's going to be the guy that helps bring this group together and set a new tone for where the Steelers need to be in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. And look, he can't draft a tackle, right? But I think this offense can be so much better with Kenny Pickett at quarterback because of Kenny Pickett. And I think he can get a lot better. And I do think, look, I mean, we're talking about the draft and free agency because that's what we get paid to talk about, and that's what everybody wants to talk about right now. But what's happening in Florida with Kenny is more important to the Steelers right now. Like getting better production. He was like statistically just bad. He was 32nd in passer rating and 31st in net yards per attempt. Like you got to be at least average. Like that's none of the rest matters if they don't get this improvement from Kenny. I think they will, but to me that's the biggest thing.
I agree with you. We'll see if all that does happen here with the Steelers coming forward. More stuff will be revealed about Kenny Pickett, and it'll be interesting to see after the draft, how does he look in minicamp and what kind of tone does he set there? You can get all that coverage there at SteelersNow.com. Alan, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people can find you, follow you, get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter, SteelersNow.com. Also, shout out to, and I wish I had caught his name, but the listener that was my Uber driver in Phoenix on my way to the airport. It was like, I know you from Chris Carter's podcast. I was like, yeah, you do. And so you got listeners everywhere, Chris, and shout out to them everywhere. And don't be shy if you see me out there. Just give me a hey, what's up?
Same to everyone else who sees me out there. Thank you so much to that listener. Thank you, Alan, for joining us. And hey, yeah, don't be afraid of watching. We're very approachable. We don't just brush you off. Now, if we're working and we're moving fast, just understand that, hey,
at the game, I'm busy. Everywhere else,
Right, exactly. But thank you to you all who out there who do love the show, who watch it, listen to it a lot, and keep coming back for more. We do appreciate you guys a lot, and who aren't afraid to reach out and talk to us, because I think that it's always great to interact with people who give us some great stuff. So absolutely, thanks again everyone for checking out the show. I'm Chris Carter, your host here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques, where I will post the poll. You can vote for who did a better top 10 list of cornerbacks. Again, you can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're interested in the Pitt Panthers and Pitt football, they got some interesting stuff coming up with their spring practices. I did some coverage there. You can also listen to this show just like you listen to all the shows that I'm on with North Shore Drive podcast with Post-Gazette as well on all your favorite podcasting apps, but also on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for more episodes. Back tomorrow talking more about your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.